You're listening to Voices, the Origins Foster Care podcast, where we talk all things fostering, from personal stories to expert insights. We explore what it's like to be a foster carer, touching on topics like the rewards fostering brings and the challenges carers face, to the real impact that opening your home to a child in care can bring. Our goal is simple: to raise awareness of the need for foster carers and to show the difference that a loving and supportive home can make for a child in care. So if you've ever wondered what fostering is all about, this podcast is for you. I'm your host, Eithne Larkin, and I'm delighted you're here. So grab yourself a cuppa, get comfy and settle in, because we've got a great conversation ahead. Welcome back to Voices, the Origins Foster Care podcast. Today we're bringing you a truly powerful and insightful conversation, one that gets right to the heart of what it means to grow up in the care system. Joining me today is Mark Hennessy. Mark is a remarkable young man who spent over a decade in the care system here in Ireland, experiencing various homes before transitioning into independent living. His journey has given him a unique and incredibly valuable perspective on the strengths, challenges, and vital need for connection within the fostering experience. Mark is now a passionate advocate, using his voice to shed light on what young people in care truly need. His insights today will offer a profound understanding that goes beyond policy and statistics, touching on the deep human need for trust, belonging, and hope. Get ready for an honest, moving, and ultimately inspiring conversation. Let's welcome Mark Hennessy. For listeners who may not be familiar with your story, Mark, can you tell us a little bit about your background growing up in care and about the work you do now?
Yeah, so I was in care for 11 years from 2007 to 2000, in aftercare, so maybe a bit beyond if you're counting beyond 18. But what drew me into it, the original idea was to actually go into the guards, but at 18, that probably I was advised that wasn't probably the best decision, and to maybe go get a course behind you. So I thought, what else would I like to do? And given my care background, I thought, social care might be something I'd be interested in. I might be able to contribute, give back to kind of the. I felt I was quite lucky growing up that I got a good foster family in the end, and that I was with them long term. So I felt quite lucky in that sense, and I just felt like I wanted to give back. So I thought, what could I do, and what course would best kind of help me achieve that? So it was social care, and I went through that course, and then was working in social care for a while, and then I've just recently gone in to do a master's in social work. I was given the opportunity to work within a social work department, which encouraged me to maybe contribute more so in that way rather than in a social care kind of setting. So that's what's kind of encouraged me to land in the area I am now.
Interesting. And I think in particular in the media, we hear a lot about, I suppose, negative talk about social workers and negative talk about foster
Mm.
care and the shortage of social workers. But it's interesting that because, I suppose, of your experience, you've decided to become a social worker. So do you want to talk maybe a little bit about what your experience was like? You mentioned that it was positive and that you had a very stable foster family. Do you want to share a little bit about that or how you
Yeah,
felt when you were in foster care?
yeah, of course. I suppose that I can remember. I think there's two foster families before that were kind of more shorter term. Before I ended up being with the family I was from 7 until 18. But beforehand, there was two other foster placements which didn't work out in the end. I suppose at 7, I went into a foster family. I think it was on an emergency basis. I think myself and my brother were heading towards residential care, which, for 7 year olds, no social worker wants to see any child at that age going into a residential care setting. Foster care is always, the priority. And I suppose I was lucky that these emergency foster carers decided to keep myself and my brother for the full, I suppose, 11 years in the end. It takes people, I suppose, with a lot of heart and empathy to agree to go from an emergency basis to long term care basis. And I'm very grateful. I was there for 11 years. I'm very conscious that not all young people have that opportunity.
Mm.
There's I know at the moment there's quite a scarcity of placements, for foster carers, residential everywhere. And I suppose during my time as well, I was lucky enough to have social workers and I remember in particular my last social worker who would, she would really be involved, would really try her very best. And that's left a positive impact on me. I suppose naturally enough, given the role social workers are in, there's naturally going to be maybe conflict with young people in terms of decisions have to be made, best interests, etc. But I was very lucky to have, a good social worker who, contributed to me being where I am now. So I maybe I do have a soft spot, I suppose, for social workers, and that's kind of led me to going into this field now.
And do you anticipate you will work in the area of child protection?
Already am.
You are, okay.
I already
That's
am. Yeah.
And obviously, given your experience growing up, I think you probably bring an additional viewpoint and additional experience to that role. You mentioned that the foster family took you and your brother into care. And that's something that here in Origins, I'm working recruitment and we work very hard to talk to people who are open to taking siblings into care. How important was it for you that you and your brother moved together?
Yeah, well, just speaking from my own experience, like I know it is, you always try keep sibling groups together, keep the family together as best you can, let that relationship grow between siblings, the familiarity. And I
Mm.
suppose that was no different for me and my sibling. It was always good that we could be in the same place. It can be very daunting for a child. And I remember I moved placements a few times. It's very daunting for a child to be walking into a new home, new people, if other homes didn't work out for whatever reason, building trust again with a new person, a new family in a new area that you may not know, new school. It's very daunting. It is. So I think alone, just having that brother, that sister, whoever it be with you there can kind of ease that and reduce the anxiety of the experience. I can remember it is very daunting going from one place to another. And I suppose the relationships you had previously, where maybe you built that bit of trust, it's no longer, it all affects children. And I'm very conscious of that now, especially in my role that it's, a child going to a new foster home, you're explaining what to expect, and you're trying to kind of reassure a lot of them anxieties. Suppose you're never going to do it 100%, but I do feel it's important to at least answer some of the questions that they may have to reduce them anxieties. The personal experience has translated over to, I suppose, my working life as well.
Yeah, and I think that's really, really good insight for you to have as a social worker as to how those children that you are bringing into care might be feeling. And I suppose as foster carers, those feelings really, they aren't something that's always articulated. We can make assumptions that children are anxious or nervous, but really, when a child moves to you in foster care, they don't have the capacity to share with you. They don't trust you initially anyway, and they don't have the capacity to share all of those feelings. Can you maybe talk to us a little bit about what some of those, obviously anxiety you mentioned, what other kind of feelings do you have? I suppose in particular, maybe when you've had previous homes that for
Mm.
whatever reason haven't become your permanent home.
Yeah, so I suppose I can speak mainly from a personal perspective. In terms of what you're feeling as a child, you may not be even able to put your finger on it yourself. You could have a situation where you might be having access with your birth family, you might not be. It depends on the situation that you were received into care. So it's very likely, as well, in my case, there could be feeling of being rejected, whether that be by your birth family, feelings of anger maybe towards your birth family, feelings of anger towards the social worker, maybe feelings of anger even towards, like everything. You could be just very angry and upset with the situation,
Hmm.
which would be expected. You've gone from a life of, this is the norm, this is normality to me, and now that's no longer the case, and you're having your whole life is being uprooted and changed, and that can be very difficult for an adult, never mind a child. And a child who may not be able to express these emotions or these feelings in the same way an adult can. Just being very conscious of that. So if I were to answer your question, I would be very, you feeling abandoned, rejected, angry, upset, maybe frustrated with the situation. It would be a whirlwind of emotions. And sometimes it might be a case of having to kind of ride that roller coaster with the young person in order to kind of help them get through it, to build that trust, to build that bond, build that relationship, learn about them, be open minded, be open to what they're saying. Them initial stages, they can be very difficult. I won't say otherwise. I know for me personally it was difficult. Maybe not my behaviors or how I was reacting, but I suppose I am conscious they will probably manifest at some stage, whether that be after an access with a parent, after a conversation with a social worker. There's a lot going on for kids when they go into foster care. They be happy, smiling at the surface level, or they may not be, but there is a lot of emotions going on there, regardless.
And I suppose there must be an element of lack of autonomy. You have no choice, as it were, over the family that you're going to live with. You've no choice of the area.
Yeah.
And even like as adults, for us to comprehend that someday somebody's just going to come and tell me, you're going to live here and you're going to go to school there, or you're going to go here. Like, how, I suppose, does that feel for a child, even a young child?
No, that's a really good point. I suppose I'd imagine I know, you always try and match the child with the family,
Mm,
personalities, keep them within the same area. But I suppose given that there is such a need for foster carers, and even like, resident, there's such a need for these kind of homes for young people that, sometimes it's not always possible, and they may be, for example, living in Dublin, Cork, or Kerry, and they may have to go a few counties over. And it'd be quite difficult, quite challenging for the young person. As you said, they don't have a lot of autonomy. It's down to the foster carers, it's down to the social worker to make decisions that's based on their best interest. And, of course, you're always, trying to listen to the voice of the child, provide options. I suppose you can always try do what you can from a professional standpoint. And before I went into the professional side of things, it's not something that I fully understood. It can be quite difficult when other people are, making decisions for you that you don't agree
mhm,
with. And that can be a big cause of conflict, even though as an adult now, and I know now that maybe that was the correct and right decision. But at the time, it's quite difficult. And you have all these other emotions going on, anger and hurt and upset, and you feel you're not being heard, and it can be quite difficult to navigate these things for everyone, for both the child, the social worker, the foster care, the link social worker, and it can be quite difficult for everybody.
While you're listening, here's one small thing you can do to help. If you're finding this conversation helpful, please follow the podcast and share it with someone who might benefit. It's free for you, but it makes a big difference, and it could help the right person discover the life-changing impact foster carers can make. Let's get back to the conversation. And you mentioned listening to the voice of the child, and I suppose here in Origins, that's something, that we're always is foremost and right on the table. It's about what we do. Do you feel, not necessarily by your foster family, but in general, the system, do you feel that you were listened to when you were growing up?
If I'm being honest, a lot of it I can't remember, which is probably a good thing. I suppose you
Mm-hmm.
remember it more if you weren't listened to. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But I remember my social workers. I know you have the statutory reviews, the child and care reviews, etc. And I do remember the social worker asking me and sitting me down at the time, and trying to get my views out of me. And I suppose looking back on it, I wish I engaged with her more. But at the time, I was happy and I was content with everything. I was in school, I had that stability, everything was going well. And whether that at the time was kind of like, how quickly can I get the social worker away from me? You know what I mean? Just let me get on with my life, kind of situation.
Mm-hmm.
But I do have to actually give credit and fairness. My social worker, she always did try to, and well, all of them. There was a few, but they always did try get, my opinion out of me, how things going, kind of them open-ended questions, trying to explore how I'm feeling, if there's anything I'd like change, what's working well. I did feel listened to. However, I will say I didn't. I felt I probably should have engaged more, but it was more of a case of I don't want a social worker coming to my door every 3, 6 months, etc. So I maybe didn't engage as well as I could have, but I suppose that's because things were going well at the time. So, in fairness of me being listened to, yes. However, I felt I probably could have taken the opportunity to converse more with her. But in fairness, things were going well.
Okay. You mentioned a few interesting points there that I could relate as a foster carer to. And the one is, yeah, you wish now in hindsight that you could relate better to your social worker and they are obviously there for your good. But it is really difficult as a foster care looking on at young people growing up and going to school and then they have to go and meet their social worker. And to me, sometimes it must be really difficult for you because it's really just another way of highlighting that you're different to the person who's going home to the birth parents. And the other thing you mentioned was that you had a number of social workers, which I know for the children that we had in our care was really frustrating. What would your thoughts be? We hear a lot about social worker burnout, they're overwhelmed with the amount of caseloads they have, but we very seldom hear from people who've grown up in care how, I suppose, the impact of overwhelm and burnout and change of social workers impacts their lives.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point, and you're right. There is, and it's that you don't need me to say it. It's well documented. The lack of social
Mm,
workers in the country. I know social work courses are expanding at the moment. New apprenticeships are coming out, and I suppose, and I'd imagine it would be partly for cases to be allocating for children to have social workers, which to me is the priority. You know what I mean?
hmm
Would be the priority. But in terms of the impact on the child, yeah, it can be quite difficult. I suppose maybe less so on children who are on very stable placements, long-term foster placements, may not need that at a higher level of support or
hmm
engagement. But for children who are maybe in crisis and children who are, struggling, it'd be very important to have that contact to reach out to if things aren't going well. And I suppose when there is a multitude of social workers, you're building trust with a new person that you don't know, and maybe you had a good relationship with your social worker and you knew you could call her, she or him, and they pick up right away and you could speak to them freely and you knew they would be able to help, or maybe would it be just for a chat. You may not have that support anymore and you're building from scratch. And then on the opposite side of things, I can imagine for a new social worker coming into and meeting the young people, they're probably, anxious. They're probably trying to put their best foot forward, seeing how they can help and trying to build that relationship. But, these things take time. You're dealing with children who, well, at the time are very traumatized, may need that extra level of support. And, due to the things I mentioned there to start. So it can be very difficult all around. So consistency is what I always say, consistency.
And I suppose it's all about the relationships. And I think you've also gone on to volunteer with Epic,
Mm.
which is the support for young people. Do you want to tell us a little bit about did you get support from Epic when you were in care or what
No,
took you
thank
to Epic?
Yeah, so funny enough, it's my involvement with them is kind of somewhat curtailed since going into social work and social care and
Mm.
competing demands, as you'd imagine. But I've never actually was referred to them when I was in care. Thankfully, there was no need to. But it was I came across them while on a social care placement, and they were speaking in the college I was attending, and that's the first time I'd actually heard of them and engaged with them. And I thought, I might be able to contribute here. So that's when I, started working with Epic. And as I said, I suppose my involvement has been less so the more my professional career's
Mhm.
taken over. I suppose I work in a crisis intervention service, and that can be quite challenging on the body with hours. But I was happy. I was delighted to contribute to the likes of a care day and some things going on with the organisation internally, and very grateful to work with them. I try to contribute now in other ways, mainly different things going on within my own organisation and different aspects in there to do with the care system. And I suppose if anything else comes up that whether it be a research study, whether that be an event, I would always try to put my name forward to help and contribute to.
And having grown up in care, what would you say today to anybody who's listening and may never have even thought about foster care, may not be aware that there is such a crisis in Ireland for foster carers at the moment, or may think, I wouldn't be able to do it?
Yeah. So what I would say is the first and most important part is asking the question, inquiring about it, because you never know, you might actually be perfect for the role. I will be honest, it is incredibly rewarding when you see when that child hits, when now adult hits 18 and they leave and they're going to college or they're achieving things, whether that be a degree, whether that be their leaving cert, it can be the most rewarding feeling ever. And it takes a very empathetic person to do this job. And while it can be challenging at times, being there for the young person through them rough times, having that empathy, and look, it can be quite difficult, like I said, but it is incredibly rewarding. I personally have an immense amount of time and respect for foster carers, but it can be amazing. And it's a tough and amazing job.
And, I always say as a foster carer that, people assume that the foster carers changes somebody's lives. But I always say equally that the young person coming into care changes the foster carers' lives forever. So I'm sure your foster parents and your foster family feel that you changed their lives dramatically for them as they changed your life.
Well, I can personally say I wouldn't be here now if it weren't for my foster carers. I suppose I wouldn't have a level 7, a level 8, and a level 9 behind me if it weren't for them. I suppose I was taken from a bad enough situation, and I'm just very grateful that I got the foster care as I did. Like I said, I wouldn't be where I am now. I wouldn't be a social care worker. I wouldn't be a qualified social worker if it weren't for them. And I wouldn't be able to contribute back how I am now again if it weren't for them. So in the long run, it for them it was 11 years of their lives as well. They're giving up for me, and like I said, I'm incredibly grateful. And it's an amazing job, and I like to think they did a great job. Mistakes get made in terms of you're learning about the young person, what works, what doesn't. You're dealing with a lot of trauma, and the young person's behavior. I can't say I was a saint either, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
And it can be quite difficult, but they stuck with it, and like I said, I'm eternally grateful.
Yeah, and what I say is, parents make mistakes. The only difference is it's not documented. But now, thankfully, certainly in Origins, there's great support for foster carers 24 hours a day to reach
Mm.
out and assist them in their role. Now that you're coming to, I suppose, child protection from the other side, which is absolutely amazing, and congratulations on your hard work and getting your degree and your master's, and I suppose coming back to an area that you can really make a difference. What hopes do you have for fostering in Ireland in the future?
I feel if all possible, kids should be in foster care. And unfortunately, that's not always possible now because there is a lack of foster carers at the moment. And my hope is that more people would agree, and would inquire even to do it, whether that be respite, emergency, short term, long term, whatever that may be. You genuinely do change people's lives, children's lives, young adults' lives, and my hope is that more people would have a look into doing it. I feel it's really your first step, even if you don't end up doing it, just asking the question, inquiring about it, speaking with other foster carers, testimonials, whatever that may be. I really do feel that foster care is such an important job. And without it, we wouldn't be able to give kids the opportunity to achieve like what they have. I know a lot of people who have been in care, who have left care, and they've gone on to do very similar things, great things. And it's great to see that. I'm just very conscious there's a stigma around the care system and outcomes. So I'm kind of changing that perspective as well. And foster carers are a key part in that. There's a lot of good stories out there around amazing foster carers, amazing social workers, amazing social care workers, teachers. So many amazing stories out there of young people going on to achieve great things, whether that be with Epic, whether that be through other organizations. And I suppose I feel an important part is definitely having more good stories out there. I'm very grateful, and my story is good for 90% of it, other than the start, of course. But there are so many more people out there who are achieving great things and who maybe you don't know are in care. And I suppose is acknowledging the hard work that foster care professionals are actually putting in to achieve these outcomes. So yeah, good stories and information. I think a lot of them good stories will contribute to reducing that stigma.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much, Mark, for sharing your deeply personal story with us. And I think it's just really incredible for you and a tribute to your foster family that you are now the holder of a master's in social work and that you are now going back to impact lives in the same way that social workers impacted yours. So we would like to wish you the very best of luck on your journey as a social worker. So thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you.
Mark, thank you so much for sharing your personal journey with us today. It's been truly inspiring to hear how your experiences in care have shaped your passion for supporting young people today. Your voice is so important in shaping a better future for young people in care. It truly underscores that at the heart of fostering, it's about building trust, connection, and hope. You've been listening to Voices, the Origins Foster Care podcast. To keep up with new episodes, follow us wherever you get your podcasts. If today's conversation resonated with you, we'd be so grateful if you left a review or shared Voices, the Origins Foster Care podcast, with someone who'd appreciate it. It really helps more people discover Voices and learn about fostering in Ireland. For anyone listening who has been inspired by Mark's story and feels they might have room in their home and heart, please do explore the possibility of fostering. You can visit originsfostercare.ie to find out more and take your first step. Join us again next month for more stories from the fostering community. Until next time, I've been Eithne Larkin, and you've been listening to Voices, the Origins Foster Care podcast. Thanks for listening, take care, and have a wonderful day. Voices, the Origins Foster Care podcast, is produced by Aidan Quigley at aq.ie.